Well, I've crashed it.
Scheiße!
And there's nobody else to blame but myself. So, to you there in the comments who posted that one, you're 100% right. Looks like I still have a lot to learn about driving an old car. In the meantime, there is plenty to fix. So, better get started. So, how on earth did this happen? Well, we've got your standard 2-lane traffic here, with 2 lanes for both directions, and 1 more extra lane for those that want to go left into this street here. And the fella ahead from me presumably wanted to go left as well. I came right behind him, and what I didn't know was he didn't want to go left, but he wanted to do a turnaround. And probably he noticed that his turning radius wasn't going to fit or something else, he decided to stop. And I was so close behind him, bam, I slammed right into him and you saw the rest. Would have happened in any other car to me as well. It all happened so quickly, I didn't even touch the brakes in time. Yeah, the sad thing is that right here was a traffic light. We all know what happened with that and why I hit the gas instead of the brakes, as I should have.
Signals. Oh, 30 seconds gone from your life.
Gee whiz! Oh, dear me! Didn't bust it!
Completely avoidable, all my fault. So it's no one to blame but myself, and nobody to fix it up but myself. Let us assess the amount of damage to the car. It's a typical front left impact situation, which bent the bumper of course. It broke the bumper bracket, and the homemade fog light beam pulled down on the front right frame horn as well. The impact continued to not only destroy the front left wheel rim, it also bent the front axle, sheared off the front left spring shackle, and made a mess of everything that connects the steering, the brakes, and the shock absorber to the front axle. We've got cosmetic damage on both fenders. The headlight bar is bent. Matter of fact, the impact was so strong it busted the transmission bell to pieces. The only positive thing I could note down is that apparently the frame stayed straight for everything that bears load on the car. Nobody was hurt. I was a bit surprised about that myself. But to all those that think the cars back then were built so tough and the plastic cars of today can't stand a chance against them, well, here's how the other guy looked after the impact, and he drove on while my car got home on a Ram truck. I reckon this is how the first hot rods were born. Made an accident, no money for new fenders, so just get rid of them all. Hot rod anyone?
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
No? Alright. My last hopes of the axle having remained straight have herewith been diminished. As you can see, this is what straight looks like. This is what unstraight looks like. What else? Oh yeah. all the grease that I put into these links, just to make sure they don't wear out, didn't get in here. I guess once the car was parked for 30 odd years, the stuff in here just gets so hardened and caked up that it doesn't allow for any fresh grease to enter. It'll just be pushed out the sides.
Connect, and then about 2 squirts, and you should see it come out of the shackle. If you don't see grease come out both sides of the shackles, it's okay, don't panic. It still got greased.
Nope!
So, it's probably a good idea, though not necessary, to take that shackle apart as well and clean it thoroughly to make sure it's not running dry. You can see that this bushing is actually oval already to the bottom left corner here. So we're going to probably replace on that too.
Trying to be gay is whistling in the dark. I am only what you make me. Come take me, I'm yours. How happy I would be to beg and borrow or sorrow with you.
Now some of these pieces, like that steering rod which turned into a boomerang, they're just beyond repair. But most of these I can actually just straighten out in the vise.
Though I knew tomorrow you'd say we were through. If we drift apart, then I'll be lost alone. Though you use my heart just for a stepping stone, how can I help dreaming of you? I love you, I'm yours.
The rim turned out to be a lost cause, sadly. I had 2 spare rims sitting about. They were bent as well, not as badly however, so I set about straightening the spokes using whatever tool I had lying about that could be used as a lever. And then I used some hydraulic equipment to get the overall run out within spec. They're never going to be perfect, but I wanted them, you know, as close as possible, somewhat similar to the other rims I had on the car already. And since they were absolutely insensitive to whatever hammer blows I could send at them, the hydraulic was really the only way to go. And even that took some very unhealthy looking deformation for them to get back in line. After straightening, I base coated them using just a brush. I figured it was much easier to get into all the nooks and crannies and behind the spokes from all directions than using a paint gun. And since the paint that I had mixed to match the other wheel colors, I had to apply with a spray gun because it was just not working with a brush at all. With everything painted up nicely, I could then go about mounting the tire. I had one rim with a slight ding in the outer edge and one which, despite all efforts, just kept wobbling right on along. So you can guess which one I chose. Now, I don't know what it is in the factory videos, it just looks so simple. They just throw it on there, no tools needed, 10 seconds it's done. Like a child could do it. Well, I'm not a child, so apparently I have to keep cussing and yearning and moaning with fighting. And, well, eventually it went on. I didn't film the frame straightening process, but here's the basic setup. Damit uns keiner mangelnde Kreativität hier bescheinigen kann. Ja. Remember back when I did the brakes that I didn't have the pins? Well, they arrived about a week later, so I figure now is the perfect time to change the worn out ones with new ones and be done with that issue after about a year and a half. I was a bit skeptical about straightening the front axle. Wouldn't it just break upon trying to bend it back? Well, there is some pretty impressive footage of Ford themselves testing out the bendability of the axle by twisting it into a corkscrew, I think 7 or 8 times. And there is also some pretty funny pictures of some American daredevils turning their axle into a bow and arrow and straightening it with the use of a car jack, a vise, or say a motorhome. With the axle back in a flat plane, we now have to check for camber, and we do that by inserting plugs into where the spring perches would go, and then I took some very long, thin, straight rods, inserted them, and measured the distance at the bottom and 1 meter up, and then you can Pythagoras what the angle is. You want about 7 degrees of camber per side, and you can also use these rods to check for torsion in the axle. I also managed to source a new used spring leaf. The old one was just too far gone. This one, when I say new, it's also old and it had lost a lot of its springiness, so we had to re-arch it on the press, and while we were there I used the old leaf spring to make myself a new front bumper bracket. Here is another prime example of poor repro quality in the Model A spare parts department. This is a brand new shackle along with a brand new bushing to it. And it has that much play. That's more play than the bushing in here, which is severely elliptical and which I would consider worn out, has. As you can see, if I try and insert this in here, barely even fits. So not only is this shackle too large, but this bushing is too small also. So I'm going to have to get creative because there's no way I'm fitting that in here. Well, second time's a charm apparently. I bought some new bushings and they're a much nicer fit. So let's press them into place. I've went ahead and pushed fresh rubber onto these guys here because who knows when the next chance is to be doing that. Looks already pretty much like a front axle. And for the next steps I'll be transferring it down onto the dolly because I fear it's going to get too heavy to lift if I put the brakes on and the drums and the spring and whatnot. It's a pretty hefty beast.
Sag nicht du zu mir, wenn meine Frau dabei ist, tu das nicht, sonst wird sie bös. Mein Kind, sie freut sich nicht, wenn unser Ton zu frei ist. Gegenteil, sie wird nervös. Sag nicht du zu mir, wenn meine Frau dabei ist, tu das nicht, oh lass sie ruhen. Sie kränke, nein, das könnte ich nicht, nein, das will ich nicht, nein, das darf man nicht tun.
Oh, jetzt macht doch kein Zinnober. Front axle installed. Now I can install the steering rod and the brake rod from the left. Roll the car forward a couple of millimeters, inches, small amount, and get ready to pull the rear. That's the spring spreader installed. Now you're supposed to lighten off the nuts on the shackles. I've already done that. And then check if the piece of sheet behind the shackle is starting to get loose. That's when you know you've tightened the spreader enough so that there is no more load on the shackle. Then you should be able to slide it right out. Of course, supporting the rear end with some sort of a jack or something. So here's the reason why I wanted to take the rear axle out with the spring spreader this time, to get at the shackles. They are so caked full with old dry rotted grease, despite me lubing this up every frickin' 500 miles, that they've actually been running dry. Can you see how shiny that is back there? That's never seen any grease that bit here. So I'm going to give these a nice cleaning. And furthermore, while taking this apart, I discovered that they actually installed a bushing which was way too short. I made myself some new ones out of Teflon this time because I didn't want to waste a bunch of expensive bronze by drilling most of it out. What I don't understand is why they didn't put this grease hole here in the middle and then have a path to the left and a path to the right. I mean, like this, the grease will obviously try to escape through the short route and not take the long way here, right? Planned obsolescence. That's the answer. So anyway, let me now make a complete mess of this poor old rag, trying to degrease all of these pieces here. And then we can actually start and rob the parts of the wrecked transmission bell and put them onto the new old one which I got. Refurbish it and then slap it onto the transmission. I'm going to make the best out of my situation here and also rebuild the transmission itself. You may recall that it is in rather poor shape too, so while I'm here might as well. That, however, will be for another video. I've already painted it green, so it's not as obvious it's a new part. The only thing that's left to do here is probably replace this shaft here, which the clutch and brake pedal ride on, with the one that's currently in the car. And also replace the bushings which went in here for the clutch actuating shaft because they weren't so thin, they just basically fell out. Other than that, it's a very fine specimen and it's going to work beautifully, I imagine. Here are the new bushings, and before I press them in, two things fell into my mind. Number one, these are identical to the brake and clutch pedal bushings, so they have hole for a Zerk fitting. This can't be greased. So secondly, I found out that on my car these bushings are plain worn out as well. So you know, on a car that you can grease everything on, why can't you grease these two? My resolution is drill 2 holes, add 2 Zerk fittings and have these greasable as well. I welded the old transmission bell back together again, and then sold it on eBay for an ungodly amount of money. Nah, I'm just kidding. I painted the inside white, and now it's acting as a lampshade for my garage lighting. Another fun little topic were the shackle bushings in the rear. This bushing down here, for all sakes of argument, that's perfectly fine. I mean, there is a little bit of play and there's always room for improvement. But hey, you know what? I'll take it. This one up here is what I would consider worn out. But you ain't seen nothing yet. That's the bushing which had been too short previously. And I'm kinda glad I made that one out of Teflon, because now that has adapted to the oval part and I can now ream it out back to round. Well, I've taken the bushing back out and giving it some good cleaning with brake clean. I've established somewhat of a metal surface in there between all the grease. And I'm going to try a crap load of JB Weld in there, see if I can fill up that bottom left corner and maybe rejuvenate that a little bit. Because, well, I mean, the Teflon would probably serve as a band-aid, but it would wear out rather quickly if it's just that single-sided oval piece. Maybe the JB Weld can act as a little bit of a cushion and make the hole somewhat round, and then the rest will be filled in by the Teflon bushing. I've gave the JB Weld about, shall we say, an hour to settle, and then I've inserted this undersize Teflon bushing which I made earlier, and it's going to serve as sort of a guide so I don't have to, you know, ream-out a bunch later on in the wrong places. Getting the bushings out of the rear spring turned out to be a real challenge. I tried hammering, I tried heat, I slitted them in half, I busted my bearing puller to shreds. Then finally they gave in to a contraption with different spacers and a big-ass thread. It was only then that I noticed the spring spreader pushes the spring leaf eyes shut, and that makes the bushings stick. And out comes number 2. Not gonna say that one went on its own. Still did take the spindle here and a bunch of cussing and hammering, of course, because it had eaten itself into the material. You can see quite some substantial scoring there. But look, no saw cuts in here, nothing. So, yeah, spring spreader and bushing outtakening, not combinable. The clutch pedal, I thought, had worn out down here, and I had full intentions of somehow brazing this up or something, but having taken it all apart, turns out it's not that much wear on here, well, it's a little bit, but much more on the piece that gets inserted into it. I mean, that is significant. Anyways, I'm going to be really chintzy here and just turn it around 180 degrees. That's going to give me a fresh surface on the bottom. That ought to count something like soldering, right? Fixed. That just about sums up the rear end. I could now join the transmission to the new bell housing, mount that onto the engine, and then get the rear axle back into place. You know, it's been a long time when the shutoff valve has started catching rust again. Yep, we have spark. Proof we don't fake anything here at Astra-Werke. This is just insane. I'm driving around, no fenders, no floorboards, no license plate. Down there is the transmission that I built myself. I'm driving a monster that I've crushed myself. I'm absolutely running high in here. Haven't even left second gear. Here we go. Can't say if the transmission is any better than what it was before, unmodified. It's just... I can't even describe it. The monster is back. Oh my fucking god, yes. Now that just leaves the fenders to be repaired. For continuity reasons, there is a small time jump here. I crashed the car in November, I fixed... The drivetrain fix was June, and the fenders I did somewhere in between. It had turned winter by now, and with the weather completely unfit for any outside work, I decided rather than strip the paint off myself and do the Bondo work myself and have the paint put back on myself, to just source this out. And so I went on and had the fenders sandblasted, and with the paint and Bondo gone, I could really assess the damage on these things. The fenders and wheels are back from sandblasting. One thing I'm really happy about is that the large surfaces don't seem to be rust pitted. Underneath all the Bondo there is actually clean metal, which is good, because it saves me a lot of time hammering about on them. What I'm not so happy about is that there is a ton of work that has already been done or attempted to be done to these. In numerous spots people have tried to fill in rust holes and tried to weld in new pieces of sheet, and they did it so badly that it just has to be redone. There's no other way around it. I'm going to start with this one because it's the better one. I mean, they both look pretty terrible, but this one has the accident damage on it, and this one, at least the curve, is somewhat original. So I'm going to see if I can make this one neat, and then see if I can copy the profile on this one. And then they should be, you know, symmetrical enough for the gals I go out with. That being said, I know nothing whatsoever about working with sheet metal, so it's going to be an interesting one. All I know is pretty much from watching YouTube channels like Tata Auto Restoring, funny guy, worth taking a look at. And, well, I've got a bunch of hammers and dollies and, you know, files and whatnot, so I'm going to see what I can come up with. Once again, I have no clue what I'm doing, so I probably won't be doing too much explaining. You know, I'm just going to see how things turn out. and if they work out for me, then maybe I can go into detail about what the hell I did or tried to achieve.
And making them blue for taking my cares away. I tip my heart to you. So thanks for everything, every thrill in your tender caress. Thanks to you alone for all that I'll ever possess. You gave me my reason to dream and made every dream come true. And so for everything, my thanks to you.
Starting to reach a point here where I think I'm not doing this fender any good if I keep hammering at it. You know, if I was just wasting my time, that would be one thing, but I think I'm actually making it worse. So I think it's time to admit defeat, that I suck at doing sheet metal work, and I'm going to head over to a fella to weld in some patches here, and once that's all done, I can give these away to somebody that knows what they're doing. He'll ask money for it, no doubt, but I think if I keep trying to make this any better, he'll just be asking more money after that. So yeah, I'm going to abandon ship while I still can. I tried doing the weld-in patches myself, which once again resulted in finding out that I wasn't that good at sheet metal work, and that I didn't have the tools for two-dimensional curving and rounded off edges and whatnot. So we redid those before welding them in. I cut out the old welded pieces with an angle grinder, followed that up with a lot of contour grinding and filing, and then butt welded the new pieces in. No matter how clean you weld and no matter how much you grind afterwards, there will still be some traces left. So I decided to cover those traces up by leading or tinning the fenders. This is the more old school and labor intensive brother of body filler or Bondo. I chose it because it's more flexible, lead is soft, and it won't crack under decades of vibrating around. Plus, I really didn't like the idea of all the grinding and sanding dust left over by the Bondo. I rather want to get lead poisoning. Preparing the fenders is actually the most important step. You have to sand this all clean. Sandblasted surfaces are not clean enough. Weld joints have to be thoroughly cleaned out for the lead to stick on it. Even the soldering paste or tinning butter won't stick if you didn't clean the sheet metal off properly before. Applying the lead is what takes the most skill, I think, because you have to find that soft spot where the tin will get smooth enough to be applied onto the fender while not being too solid so it doesn't draw into the metal and form a strong joint, and of course not liquid enough so it will all run back down again. I had to do all this 3 times in total because of course I didn't prepare it right the first time, then I didn't apply it right the second time, so you would have hollow spots and holes and pockets in there, and then the third time I started filing it down and found out I hadn't put enough tin on. So if you want to choose this route, be patient. Once you've put way too much solder on, then it's time to file it all back down again. There is a special file for this, which can be bent and warped and adapted to the contours you want to file. It can be very coarse because tin is so soft, and whatever you do, don't try and put the angle grinder to it. It'll just melt the solder instantly and it'll splatter all about your body, and you've just ruined your soldering job. Corrosion is also an issue that you should keep in mind when you work with lead solder. The flux is highly acidic and it's in that soldering paste, so you saw me earlier there wipe the freshly solder tinned surface with a cloth. That was soaked in water mixed with baking soda to try and neutralize the acid, and everything that still stayed inside, you can see how after one day that quickly flash rusted the fenders back again. Filing the tin down is definitely the most tedious and physically exhausting part of the step, especially if you need to do it multiple times. Once you've re-evaluated all the decisions you've made in life, especially those regarding running red traffic lights, you're done with fender number 1 and you realize you've got a second one there. Lead is soft and I'm definitely no stranger to bench work and filing, but boy, this was some labor. When you're getting close, you'll notice all the little spots which you didn't put enough tin on. You can either try and fix those parts with a soldering iron if you notice it early enough. If it's too late and you just can't put anything back on without creating more issues, then you'll just have to bite the bullet and resort to body filler at this point. What's really nice about this tinning process is that if you notice there is a low spot still and you haven't covered it enough, then you can also go ahead with a hammer and just knock the metal back up and you've got some more left to file. That couldn't be done with Bondo. Regarding the skill level, it's really not that hard. You can't really go too far because the metal of the fenders is harder than the lead, so once you've reached the fenders, then the file just won't take off anymore. You only have to pay attention not to cantilever the file and knock a nice gouge into it, because that's a very quick way to ruin an hour's worth of work. Other than that, your goal is not to just get a smooth surface, but also to get as much tin back off the fenders as possible, because the thinner the layer is, the more flexible it'll be and the less likely it's going to be to get brittle over time. What you're aiming for really is just tin or lead in the low spots and the high spots being bare fender metal, and you'll be able to see that by this checkered pattern left by darker spots of the steel and lighter spots of the tin. Done! Both the fenders and myself. I'm now going to de-rust these both, give them a final coat of soda water to keep them from rusting again, and then I'm going to search professional help for painting the fenders, not for that up there. I'm plenty fine. The accident had warped the front splash pan holders just enough for me to decide and make new ones. They were already ruined before the accident. I didn't like the design of them, they were always fiddly to install. So I just drilled and tapped a few bolts with a hole in the end and installed them. They hold the bumpers just as nicely with nowhere near as much swearing. During that first drive around the block, I had noticed that my left running board was actually wobbling about quite a lot. Taking a look, I found out that the horn which keeps it attached to the frame wasn't attached to the frame anymore. I thought the rivets had sheared off, but no, some very ingenious American had decided to weld the horn straight to the frame and then weld some decorative rivet heads in place. So not only did that weld now tear a nice hole into my frame, but I also had to drill out those rivet heads in order to install some screws. while I took care of those little issues, I could actually relax and sit back, watch my fenders turn yellow, white, grey and then black, so they would be ready to be mounted on the car again. Fella didn't want to be filmed while we put them on, can't blame him for that, so now there is nothing left for me to do but present you with the finished result. So we've come full circle. It is now precisely 11 months later, to the day actually. I've crashed it, I've repaired it, discovered a couple of things that really needed doing anyways, so I can only recommend you do an accident yourself and fix up all the things that are uncovered in the process of repairing the damage. No, this was a very dumb maneuver. And I hope I learned a big lesson from it. I surely learned that repairing accident damage is a lot of work. I also learned that old cars aren't built as tough as they say. I mean, the other car just drove off with a minor scratch. And this one, 11 months. Was a long road, but you know, looking at the glistening paint now and hearing the engine chuck chuck once again, kind of reminds me why I'm doing all this. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Please don't kill me in the comments.